This program is brought to you by realestate.com.au, Australia's #1 address in property. With more properties for sale than anywhere else, we make it easier.
Thanks for being with us here on Business Now. Let's take a look around the property markets over the weekend. And you can see that the number of auctions is starting to pick up, along with the appetite of the buyers. 1,612 auctions nationally with a healthy clearance rate. Look at it there, 64.4%. In Sydney, the clearance rate was just over 60% from 554 auctions. Now look, Melbourne, it's absolutely sprung back to life. A clearance rate of almost 73% from 665 auctions. In Brisbane, 53 auctions, 54% of those were sold. But have a look at Adelaide here, 41 auctions, a clearance rate here, it's almost boom time, 85% plus. And in Canberra, 57 auctions with a clearance rate of 63%. Now, just to help explain a very strong weekend for property sales, I'm joined by Angus Moore, economist at REA Group. Angus, good to have you on. Strong numbers. Is that all about interest rates? People suddenly think that what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, certainly quite a strong weekend. Part of that's just seasonal. You know, we're in the autumn selling season ahead of Easter. It's typically a pretty busy time of year in property markets. We're seeing that in auction volumes. Clearly, we're seeing that in auction results as well. You know, part of that is seasonal. We would expect a lot of buyers in the market at the moment, but part of it may also be interest rates. You know, we've seen a bit more buyer demand in the last month or so. You know, we actually saw prices up in February. Now, we wouldn't necessarily expect to see that continue through the year, just given how quickly interest rates raised last year and the fact that that probably hasn't fully flowed through to prices yet. But you know, the fact that we saw a little bit of a bounce last month suggests there is some buyer demand and appetite floating around at the moment.
OK, take me to the New South Wales election over the weekend. Chris Minns' new Premier, Dominic Perrottet, once told me if he could only do one thing as a politician, it would be to change stamp duty on property and turn it into some form of optional land tax. Chris Minns campaigned vigorously, saying he would wipe out the land tax and keep the stamp duty. Tell me just the popularity, the way in which people have adapted to Dominic Perrottet's plan and how that might change as Christopher Minns comes in and changes it back again.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be the big policy change that we see as a result of this election, I think. You know, so the Perrottet government obviously had the first home buyer choice scheme, which meant as a first home buyer, you could opt to pay an ongoing annual land tax instead of upfront stamp duty. And that started late last year, and it's been pretty popular. We've seen a bit over 2,000 first-home buyers in New South Wales take that up. Now, we don't know the exact number of total first-home buyers, so it's hard to know what that is as a fraction.
But you think that would be a pretty significant proportion of them, right?
It's a very significant proportion. You know, it's probably...
So given that housing affordability is an issue, especially for first-time buyers and young buyers, and given the fact that you want more houses turned over so there's more stock on the market, doesn't it make sense that taking away a barrier where people are paying tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in stamp duty for an ongoing land tax just might make common sense?
It's one of the reasons that economists kind of hate stamp duty. So yes, for first home buyers, it's an enormous impost. You know, it is tens, even, you know, potentially if you're a fairly well-off first home buyer and buying an expensive home, as much as $100,000.
But look, even if you're a second or third home buyer, that's the big issue. You hang on to the house because you go, well, I don't want to actually pay $100,000 or $200,000 in stamp duty.
Right, exactly. And that's the kind of second reason we dislike stamp duty. You know, the first is that it's an impost for first home buyers for whom the deposit's typically the constraint and it's an extra upfront cost. It's also a big tax on moving home. And that means people stay too long in dwellings that are too big or too small because they want to avoid potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in stamp duty. And that means we get a less efficient distribution of homes to people. You know, people end up with 4 spare bedrooms because it's expensive to sell their home. That worsens housing affordability.
So from that point of view, it'll be fascinating to see the new Labor government in New South Wales as to how they adapt and whether, in fact, they actually reverse that policy once they get themselves into power and once they see the budget.
For sure. You know, certainly stamp duty is a very significant fraction of revenue in New South Wales and in other states. You know, New South Wales is not alone in how much we raise in stamp duty, but it does make it very difficult to reform. You know, in part, that's why we've seen it be as sticky as it is and why it's been so hard to reform. The ACT's made some steps. They're on a process to eliminate stamp duty and move towards land tax. We'd hope to see this similar in other states, but to date, it's been slow going.
Angus Moore, good to have you on the program. As always, many thanks for your time. That'll be fascinating to watch.